Connie and Richard Dabate appeared to be the perfect suburban couple, but behind closed doors their lives hid secrets so dark that one December morning would end in betrayal, murder, and a shocking unraveling of lies no one in their community ever saw coming. Connie Dabate was the kind of woman who lit up every room she walked into. Friends described her as dependable, cheerful, and always eager to lend a helping hand. She grew up in a tight-knit community where people valued honesty and family bonds, and those values stayed with her throughout her life. To her neighbors, Connie's world looked like a storybook. She had a husband, Richard, a comfortable home, and 2 children she adored. From the outside, the Dabate family seemed to have achieved the dream so many people longed for: stability, comfort, and togetherness. Connie was active in her children's lives, making sure they never felt overlooked or unloved. She volunteered at school events, organized family gatherings, and created memories that seemed destined to last a lifetime. Social media captured the highlights: vacations, holidays, smiling portraits of a family that appeared happy. To anyone glancing through her pictures, it was easy to assume she had everything. Yet even in the brightest photographs, small shadows sometimes went unnoticed. Richard played his role as a husband and father, but beneath the surface, his commitment wavered. Connie trusted in appearances, believing her marriage was built on a solid foundation. She had no reason to think otherwise, and those around her never suspected trouble. In many ways, her optimism shielded her from seeing the cracks that were forming beneath the surface. The calmness of her world gave no warning of the storm ahead. The Dabates' home sat quietly on a suburban street, surrounded by neighbors who admired them. Behind those walls, however, an unseen story was beginning to take shape, one that would twist everything Connie believed in. What seemed like perfection was not protection, and the truth was about to shatter her carefully built life. The Dabate marriage, like many long-term relationships, carried its share of strains. What started as minor disagreements grew into deeper divides that neither Connie nor Richard fully confronted. Connie, ever the peacemaker, often brushed aside her concerns, believing that time and patience would restore the warmth they once shared. But as months passed, the emotional distance widened. Conversations that once flowed easily turned into brief exchanges, often marked by frustration or silence. Connie noticed Richard's growing habit of spending long hours away from home, his explanations vague and unconvincing. She told herself he was stressed, that work was consuming him, and that their busy schedules were simply getting in the way of closeness. For Connie, the family home was still a place of comfort, and she worked hard to keep traditions alive. She hosted dinners, decorated for holidays, and tried to give her children a sense of stability. Yet underneath her efforts, she sensed the spark of her marriage fading. Richard's distracted presence, his lack of interest in shared activities, and his sudden bursts of irritability left her uneasy. Though she never voiced her suspicions aloud, she began to wonder if she was losing him to something beyond work pressures. Neighbors saw little sign of trouble. To outsiders, the couple seemed functional, just another busy family juggling responsibilities. Connie's ability to maintain a cheerful appearance disguised the truth even from those closest to her. But her private thoughts told a different story, one filled with questions she could not answer. The subtle erosion of trust and affection was invisible to the community, but within Connie's heart it grew heavier each day. What she did not realize was that Richard's secrets extended far beyond simple neglect, and the distance between them was only the beginning of something far more dangerous. Richard's life outside the walls of his home was far different from the image he presented to family and neighbors. While Connie devoted herself to her children and household, Richard drifted further into a world of secrecy. He cultivated an affair, a reckless entanglement that he justified to himself as an escape from routine. What began as occasional meetings and discreet messages soon evolved into a double life that demanded constant lies. Richard grew skilled at constructing excuses: late nights at work, sudden errands, and unexplained absences, all of which he covered with confidence. Connie, trusting by nature, never pressed too hard for answers. She believed in loyalty and had no reason to suspect betrayal. Yet the subtle signs of Richard's duplicity lingered in the background. His phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now always within reach. His mood shifted unpredictably, swinging from distracted indifference to forced enthusiasm. To the outside world, he remained a doting father and reliable neighbor, but beneath the surface he was weaving a fragile web of deception. The affair gave him a temporary thrill, a sense of control and validation that his marriage no longer provided. But each step into this hidden life bound him tighter to choices that carried enormous risk. He told himself he could balance both worlds, that no one would ever discover the truth. In reality, the lies piled higher with every passing week, threatening to crush the life he had built with Connie. As Richard sank deeper into his secret, he became less cautious, leaving traces that would one day unravel his carefully crafted narrative. What seemed harmless to him in the moment was, in truth, the foundation of a disaster. His betrayal was not just of vows, but of the trust that once defined his family's bond. On the morning of December 23, 2015, the peaceful rhythm of the Dabate household was shattered. Just after 9 o'clock, emergency services received a frantic call reporting a violent break-in at the family's home. Police and paramedics rushed to the quiet suburban street, unprepared for the chaos waiting inside. The first responders entered a scene that appeared torn apart by violence. Furniture was overturned, a glass table had been smashed, and personal belongings were scattered across the floor. At the center of the turmoil lay Connie Dabate, gravely injured, her life slipping away before anyone could save her. Richard was found nearby, partially restrained, claiming to be the survivor of a vicious attack. He told officers that an armed intruder had broken into the home, assaulted him, and fatally attacked Connie before fleeing into the woods. His voice carried the urgency of a man who had endured something unspeakable. Yet, as investigators studied the scene, their eyes caught on details that did not fit. The disarray looked dramatic but suspiciously deliberate, as though staged to mimic the chaos of a burglary. Outside, police spread quickly through the neighborhood, warning residents and searching for any trace of the supposed intruder. Patrol cars circled the wooded areas, and dogs were deployed to track a scent. Neighbors peered from their windows, stunned by the news that violence had struck so close to home. Despite the urgency, no trail could be found. Inside the house, the atmosphere was heavy with unanswered questions. Why had the attack ended so abruptly? Why had Connie been targeted with such finality, while Richard survived with only minor injuries? The crime scene was puzzling, and even in those early hours, quiet doubts began to take root. What looked like a random act of brutality carried the faint outline of something far more deliberate. Richard's account of the events that morning was dramatic and detailed. He told investigators that a tall, masked man dressed in camouflage had forced his way into the house, brandishing a weapon. According to Richard, the intruder tied him to a chair, demanded money, and launched into a violent struggle when Connie arrived unexpectedly. He claimed he tried to fight back, but the attacker overpowered him, ultimately turning his fury on Connie before fleeing through the back door into the nearby woods. It was the kind of story that, at first glance, sounded terrifyingly possible. Yet, almost immediately, inconsistencies began to appear. Detectives noticed there was no sign of forced entry on the doors or windows. The scattered belongings looked more like props than the result of a genuine struggle. Richard's injuries were superficial, small scratches and light bruises that did not match the chaos he described. When questioned further, his timeline wavered, with small details changing each time he retold the story. Police canvassed the neighborhood, but no one had seen a stranger near the Dabate home. Dogs brought in to track the supposed intruder failed to find any scent leading away from the property. Security cameras from nearby houses showed nothing unusual. The picture of a dangerous outsider began to blur, replaced by the possibility of a carefully crafted cover story. The idea of a masked intruder was compelling, but the lack of evidence left investigators uneasy. Why would a stranger choose the Dabate home at random on that particular morning? Why leave behind valuables if the motive was robbery? With each unanswered question, suspicion began to shift. What had been presented as a tragedy caused by a random act of violence was starting to look more like a crime born from within the home itself. As the investigation deepened, detectives turned to the one source that could not be swayed by emotion or performance: technology. In Connie's final hours, her Fitbit quietly recorded her movements with precision. According to Richard, She had died quickly during the intruder's attack, but the device showed she was still walking around the house nearly an hour after the time he claimed she had been killed. That small digital detail began to unravel the foundation of his story. Investigators also analyzed the couple's electronic devices. Richard's phone records revealed messages to his mistress that contradicted his supposed timeline of events. Emails uncovered financial stress and insurance paperwork that cast a new light on his motives. Even the Wi-Fi signals inside the Dabate home helped confirm when devices were active, building a clear picture of who had been where and when. The digital trail was relentless, stripping away the possibility of coincidence. The more detectives pieced together, the more Richard's tale of a masked intruder fell apart. His alibi did not align with GPS data, and the restraints he claimed were forced upon him looked increasingly staged. While he had tried to construct a narrative of chaos, technology painted a story of calculation. For Connie, the Fitbit became her silent witness. What she could not say in her final moments, the device revealed with undeniable clarity. It proved she had been alive and moving after Richard insisted she was already gone. For investigators, it was the turning point, a reminder that in the digital age, lies leave behind traces. The home, once seen as a crime scene invaded by a stranger, was now understood as the stage for something darker. Technology, impartial and unforgiving, began to speak the truth that Richard had worked so hard to bury. As detectives dug deeper into Richard's life, the question of motive became impossible to ignore. Financial records showed a troubling pattern of debt, credit card balances, and overdue bills that weighed heavily on the household. Yet, at the same time, Richard had recently taken out large life insurance policies on Connie, raising alarm among investigators. The timing was suspicious, and the potential payout painted a picture of someone desperate for relief at any cost. The affair, once hidden in secrecy, was also uncovered in stark detail. Richard had promised his mistress a future together, even speaking about plans to start a family with her. Messages revealed an intimacy and commitment that stood in sharp contrast to the crumbling relationship he maintained at home. For investigators, this double life exposed more than betrayal, it revealed motive. Connie stood in the way of the life Richard wanted to build, and removing her offered him both freedom and financial gain. Friends and neighbors were stunned as the revelations came to light. The idea that Richard could juggle such deception while maintaining the image of a family man was difficult to comprehend. To those closest to Connie, the evidence felt like a cruel betrayal not just of her trust, but of the life she had poured herself into creating. Piece by piece, the puzzle fit together, a man entangled in debt, bound by an affair, and motivated by greed. The supposed story of a random intruder no longer made sense when weighed against the very real benefits Richard stood to gain. Investigators now saw his actions not as desperate self-defense, but as deliberate planning. The motive was clear: financial relief, personal freedom, and a future without Connie. The cracks in his carefully spun narrative widened, leaving him increasingly exposed. As the evidence mounted, Richard's carefully constructed story began to collapse under scrutiny. Detectives examined the supposed break-in with meticulous care, noting the absence of forced entry on any doors or windows. If a violent intruder had stormed into the house, there should have been broken locks, damaged frames, or at least clear signs of tampering. Instead, everything suggested that the home had been entered normally, with no struggle at the point of entry. Attention soon turned to Richard's physical condition. His injuries, though shown as evidence of a brutal attack, were minor: small cuts, faint bruises, and shallow marks that appeared inconsistent with the kind of violent struggle he described. Experts concluded that the bindings used to restrain him could have been self-inflicted, tied in a way that allowed for easy escape once police arrived. To investigators, the possibility that Richard had staged his own victimhood became increasingly difficult to ignore. Forensic experts also dismantled his timeline. Blood evidence within the home conflicted with Richard's account of when and where Connie had been attacked. Combined with the Fitbit data and phone records, the sequence of events he had described was exposed as riddled with inaccuracies. What he claimed happened in a matter of minutes appeared instead to be drawn out over a much longer period. The facade of a grieving husband crumbled further under questioning. His inability to keep his story consistent, paired with the mountain of digital and physical evidence, painted him not as a survivor, but as the architect of the crime itself. What once looked like tragedy at the hands of a stranger now stood revealed as something far more chilling. A carefully staged betrayal designed to disguise murder as misfortune. With every contradiction exposed, Richard's guilt grew harder to deny. Years passed as investigators worked tirelessly to piece together the truth, and in April 2017, their efforts culminated in Richard's arrest. The once sympathetic husband who had painted himself as a victim was now charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and providing false statements to authorities. The news sent shockwaves through the community. Neighbors who had once brought casseroles to his door in sympathy now watched in disbelief as he was led away in handcuffs. The man they thought had survived a tragedy was now accused of orchestrating it. The arrest was not just about one act of violence. It was the conclusion of a calculated web of lies. Detectives had spent over a year gathering the threads: financial records, digital data, insurance policies, and forensic reports. Piece by piece, they built a case that revealed Richard not as a grieving widower, but as a man who had plotted to free himself from the life he no longer wanted. Court documents revealed chilling details, from his secret promises to his mistress to his attempts to maintain normal appearances in the days after Connie's death. The image of a man mourning his wife crumbled into that of someone capable of deception on the deepest level. For Connie's family and friends, the arrest brought a complex mix of relief and sorrow. There was comfort in knowing the truth was finally surfacing, but nothing could undo the loss they had suffered. The community, too, struggled to make sense of the betrayal. The man who had claimed to fight off a masked intruder was now exposed as the intruder within his own home. The arrest marked the beginning of a long legal battle, but for many, it was already enough to confirm what their hearts feared. Connie had been betrayed by the one person she trusted most. The courtroom became the final stage where years of secrets, lies, and grief unfolded. Prosecutors presented the case with methodical precision, laying out the timeline of Connie's final hours through digital evidence, financial records, and forensic analysis. The Fitbit, the insurance policies, the affair, all of it wove together into a chilling story of betrayal. Jurors listened as the prosecution dismantled Richard's version of events, showing how his supposed heroism in fighting off an intruder was nothing more than a fabrication. The defense struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence, attempting to cast doubt, but the facts were too strong to ignore. Connie's loved ones sat through the trial with heavy hearts, reliving the tragedy piece by piece. Each revelation reminded them not only of the brutality of her death, but also of the depth of deception she had unknowingly endured. Friends who once admired the couple's marriage now understood it as a facade. The courtroom testimony transformed the narrative from one of mystery to one of clarity. Richard had planned, executed, and attempted to conceal a crime against the woman who had trusted him most. When the verdict finally came, it carried the weight of justice. Richard was found guilty, his double life and desperate motives laid bare for all to see. The sentence ensured he would spend decades behind bars, his freedom traded for the truth he tried so hard to bury. Yet even with justice served, the outcome was bittersweet. No verdict could restore Connie's life or erase the pain left behind. For her family, the ruling provided closure, but not healing. The story of Connie Dabate became more than a local tragedy. It became a reminder of how betrayal within the safety of a home can be the most dangerous crime of all.